or Cassie, many names. I'm the board secretary and also the chair of programming. We have decided to start recent events, or this as a new event that kind of branches off of old events that we've had, where we like to have educational paneling, panel discussions that these are particularly going to be contentious conversations that we pick up on social media and notice that people get really emotional about, and we ask them to come and have these conversations in person so we can have a productive conversation instead of just getting angry on social media. So in all of these, we'll be calling professionals, we'll be calling business owners, local residents, to get like a really good and rounded perspective the best we can for these conversations. We call them the Great Debate, but they are actually just moderated conversations that should always be fair, and hopefully nobody's getting attacked. These are not supposed to be political. They're mostly to help educate and also maybe help you see a new light, or not. So yeah, I'm going to start out with having each of the panelists introduce themselves and then introduce their how they're related to the topic, and then possibly a strong opinion, an opinion that they have of the BRT. Just what a strong opinion, whatever it be. Just summarize it pretty simply. I'll start with you, Josiah.
Hi, my name is Josiah. I own Lilac Coffee on East Colfax in Dahlia. And my opinion, I think the BRT is a great idea for the long term. I think it's a great public infrastructure, but I think there's some negative, repercussions for the business owners and for the entire Colfax corridor as this construction is going on.
Good evening, I'm Jill Locantore. I'm the executive director of the Denver Streets Partnership. We are a grassroots advocacy organization working to make it easier for people to get around Denver without having to drive. So being able to walk and bike and take transit or shared scooters or whatever your choice is, we want you to have freedom of choice. And I will echo what Josiah said. We believe bus rapid transit promises to create multiple real benefits for Denver in the long term, address a lot of the problems that we care about and the vision that a lot of people have for what Denver could become in the future. And I also agree construction is disruptive, and we can and should do better to support small businesses during construction.
Hi everyone, my name is Mike Hughes. I'm the executive director of the West Corridor Transportation Management Association. There are 8 TMAs in the region. Mine covers from the western edge of the Auraria campus, along the W line in a pretty big swath, and all the way through downtown Golden. So we're helping Lakewood, Golden, Jefferson County, West Denver. And we're really interested in helping people discover and make use of alternatives to simply mindlessly getting in a car by themselves without really thinking about it. And I know I do that. I get up, I think about, I need a thing, and I just grab the keys and I hop in my car. And I don't always think, is this the right way that I should do that? But we just want to help people discover other ways. Carpools, van pools, hopping on the bus, using RTD, lots of things, walking. So that has led me to take a very keen interest in the federal boulevard project. And so I'm one of the stakeholders on federal. I think federal is vastly different than Colfax and vastly different than Colorado Boulevard, and I will be very happy to say more about why. From my perspective and the perspective of the Transportation Management Association, federal has to change. There are some pretty terrible statistics. I'm going to refer to my notes, which I stuck on my phone, just to get some of the numbers right. CDOT published some fatality information for 2023. That's when they go back and actually make sure that they're counting the numbers correctly, documenting them correctly, reporting them properly. 11 fatalities on federal in 2023, 390 injury crashes on Federal in 2023 and 797 property damage only, so fender benders on Federal. 11 dead people is 11 too many. And so we really think Federal needs to change. I've watched people drive 55. I've watched people run to catch a bus at Federal Indicator against the light and against their better judgment and nearly get run over. And so lots has to change on Federal. And the good news is there's lots of room on Federal for all the things. Really good sidewalks, decent frontage in front of businesses, maybe a bike, I don't know. Maybe we should have a bike on Federal. And lanes for cars and enough lanes and actually a way to put a bus in its own spot. So I wouldn't call those things rapid, though we can call them bus rapid transit. In fact, rapid is the problem. These actually need to be reasonably slow, and we all need to go slower to save people's lives. So I'll say more later. Thanks.
I'm Matt Larson. I am the art director on the board of RTD. I cover District E, which is sort of West Aurora, part of Southeast Denver, and down into Greenwood Village. And I don't think we're scheduled to have really any BRTs in my district, but I am pretty close to the Colorado BRT or Colorado Avenue, where it hopefully will be. So, and in fact, that line starts down less than a mile away from my house. And so, and then you go from Southmore or from Hamden, it goes on to Colorado. So I have a lot of interest in how that line works. And, my basic view is that, BRT will be great. I think the Colfax BRT has been very painful to get it built, and you can certainly question whether the way that the businesses along Colfax were supported during the construction was the best. But I think once it is done, people will love it, and I think that's what will happen with other BRT projects. And the key thing I think is that if we're going to do BRT, it needs to be real bus rapid transit. The buses need to have dedicated lanes so they can really deliver a better service than what's available right now, where they have to compete with cars and don't have sort of timed lights and things like that. So that's my sort of base position. I'm also, I'll say, treasurer of the Denver Press Club here, so that's the other thing I do.
Hi everyone, my name is Dan Busch, and I'm actually here as a resident that lives along Colorado Boulevard route. I'm in the Cherry Creek area. However, I've been meeting with residents and business owners that span the entire Colorado Boulevard BRT. We've had several meetings and lots of concerns about the project, lots of unknowns, lots of questions that haven't been answered that we feel are pertinent. Much like Michael had expressed, a lot of us feel that the Colorado Boulevard BRT is a vastly different strip with many different services. It's going through very different areas than Colfax or Federal. Both Colfax and Federal have historically been largely business street districts. As Michael pointed out, they do have sidewalks. People are taking those to more significant destinations and using it regularly. Colfax, you could go from downtown, from the courthouses, from important things like that, all the way out to Anschutz. And, Colorado Boulevard, it starts kind of in the middle of nowhere on I-70 and then ends up down in a very residential area by Busch Golf Course. Nearly the whole route is really negligent of sidewalks, which is another one of the issues that I feel could be a whole different topic. If those of you are familiar with the Denver Sidewalk Program that we're now all paying into, the majority of that street, or I should say large sections of it, On both sides, there are little to no sidewalks, and the properties oftentimes sit, within feet of the street. And in order to even just do the sidewalk project, and in particular the BRT, which will require sidewalks as well, I don't see how we do that without eminent domain and right of way and dealing with properties. And so I was surprised also when I sat in on the sidewalks Zoom call a few days ago, which impacts the whole city, of which 24 people attended. And the BRT has not had a single conversation with the sidewalk program. And so we also have a lot of concerns because of the residential areas and concerns about traffic going into the neighborhoods. And I'm getting my little cutoff. So I have more to say too, but I will stop now. Thank you.
Thank you. And in the future, we will be doing one of these great debates on the sidewalks project. So keep some of that for later. But yeah, I think to start out, I want to clarify something. And I think Mike or Matt, one of you guys mentioned a true BRT or a real BRT. Can you just describe, one of the two of you just describe for people what you mean by that?
Go there.
I mean, it's called bus rapid transit, and it's supposed to entail a great deal of construction to make it happen. If you do all this and you spend money and you haven't done something to really speed the transit of the buses along the route, then it's not really bus rapid transit. It's in fact maybe something that won't really improve public transit at all. And so it shouldn't be talked about, in my view, as BRT, because it really will give people the wrong idea about what we're spending money on. But generally, to have true bus rapid transit, what you need is lanes that are dedicated exclusively to the buses, so that they don't have to slow down for cars in front of them. They don't have to really worry about cars at all. And then you have stoplights that are timed to accommodate the buses, and ideally you have it running in the center lane so that the buses can make left and right turns without having to share that portion with cars. So they really have their own turn lane too, for when that is necessary, which it's not always that important. But if it's side running, then you have situations where cars could get in front and slow down the BRT. So really what you're trying to do, the reason you spend hundreds of millions of dollars to do it, is to make sure that the buses work. They really should be able to work essentially as speedily as the train, where they really only have to stop when they're picking people up, and don't have to compete with other traffic.
They also tend to have are intended to have platforms in the same way that the train would. So you walk directly or roll a wheelchair directly from a platform onto a vehicle, from the vehicle off again. And so it's a very different entry and exit than a bus would be, where you might have to step up into the bus, step off the curb to get on the bus, those kinds of things. So some infrastructure differences too.
And I would just add, also similar to a train, you pay the fare before you get on the bus. And so it does essentially function like a train, it just happens to have rubber tires, is really the only difference.
Thank you. And so I guess kind of switching topics, but I wanted to ask if you had perceived one aspect of the Colfax BRT that could be a lesson for future BRTs, or something that you think maybe was overlooked or could be changed with future projects. Can you just list what you might think that would be? And this is a very personal question. This is kind of for everyone to kind of put in their 2 cents. So I can go either way. Josiah, should I start with you, or do you want me to go?
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
For future projects, future BRT projects. I don't know. It's interesting because I thought about this a lot. What can the city do better about major construction projects? And I don't really know. I think there's a few things that happened, I guess, specifically to me and my like coffee is, we had our entire block is blocked off. So, it's a drive-through coffee shop. So you can either drive onto Colfax or you can drive onto Dahlia. And our entire Dahlia street is just blocked off. So that just reduces our entrance by, half. And I brought that up to the BRT, hotline. And they're like, oh, sorry, we'll put out a social media blast for you. I looked at Instagram, they have 200 followers. And I think I didn't respond to that because, we have 8,000 followers on Instagram and it's just like, we don't need that. We want some support in terms of, they told us that this Dahlia construction was going to be unblocked back in April. Then suddenly it was May 22nd. And then suddenly it was the end of June. And now we're in July almost. And we still have our entire entrance blocked up. So I don't know. I've kind of lost a lot of trust and faith in whoever the administration is that's dealing with complaints about the BRT and support for businesses because it's not realistic. It doesn't actually provide support for us. There's nothing there. And also the construction workers aren't also very knowledgeable either. Like I had to tell an entire truck to stop blocking our driveway while they were talking to each other outside their truck. And I asked them if they could move, and they're like, oh, for sure we can move, which tells me that they weren't doing construction, they were just sitting there talking. So there's just a mindfulness to that doesn't really exist. So my answer is I don't know. This is tough. I think there's been a lot of signs that the city to me doesn't really care. So that's my 2 cents.
I would agree that we can do better at supporting small businesses during construction, not just of BRT, but any infrastructure project is going to be disruptive, whether we're replacing the water main or we're widening the street to allow more cars on the street. All of these are going to be disruptive. Something the city did partially right with Colfax is they gave cash grants to businesses to help them survive, reduce sales during construction. And that's new. The city had never done that before, and most cities in the US don't do that. So already the city's doing a little bit better than they have historically or other cities. They could do even more better. The grants could be bigger, and they could just automatically give them to businesses who are pre-qualified because they're likely to lose sales and don't have to demonstrate that they've already lost 20% of their sales before they qualify. And I think we have a great model for how we can generate the funding to provide these cash grants to business with Denver's 1% for the arts program. Any project that's over a certain dollar amount, I forget exactly what it is, like $1 million, by city ordinance, 1% of that budget has to be set aside for public art. That's great. We have lots of great public art throughout the city because of that. I think it's just as important or more important that we just build it into the budget for these types of programs to support the businesses during the construction so that they can last and they can benefit from the outcomes once the project is done.
So I made the Colfax leadership of that project team really, really angry, and because I said something out loud that got published, and they called me to bludgeon me into submission, and we sat down for a couple of hours, and I told them what I would be happy to tell you now, but they all should be fired. And so they should be. We need different people running that project because they actually don't care about the businesses on Colfax. And they said to me out loud in a coffee shop on Colfax that it's okay if businesses go out of business on Colfax during construction because new businesses will come and take their place. They should be fired. So the reason that I reached out to them is I'm worried that they're gonna mess up federal, because they're doing such a terrible job on Colfax. So here are the terrible things they've done that I think have to be fixed. If you are building something in the middle of nowhere, you can leave your tools around, and you can leave equipment around, you can leave parts around. That's what they're doing on Colfax. They're closing 5-block stretches of Colfax to store stuff, and they're leaving it closed for months for no reason. They need project managers who are doing just-in-time delivery of the materials that they need, and they need to take their footprint, the actual construction daily footprint, and they need to cut it into 1/5 of what they're doing. So this is just bad project management, and they should be fired. The other thing that I have asked on federal, and this is where contractors and transportation agencies are too cozy, because of course, all these people employ each other. I work for Dottie, I go to work for a consulting firm, I need a consulting firm, I go to CDOT, I go from CDOT to another consulting firm. They're too nice to each other. I would build into the federal project and CDOT, and Colorado if it happens, an actual incentive in the contract and a penalty in the contract. A business goes out of a restaurant that's on federal, a Vietnamese restaurant, it's been there for 40 years, family-owned restaurant, goes out of business, $100,000 comes off the top of your profit. Real punishment and incentives for those kinds of disasters. And I will tell you, they won't happen if you have real financial penalties built into that contract. And that's the kind of oversight we need on federal and Colorado if and when they get built.
Yeah, I agree that the big sort of failure of the Colfax BRT has been the effect it's had on businesses, and I think Jill and Michael both had really great comments on what we might be able to do differently. I would say the other thing is that if we could get the job done more quickly, that would reduce the pain for everybody. And even though I think we've been making steady progress, I also believe that it could have been done much more quickly. If this was done in China, perhaps it probably would have been done in a few weeks. And we don't really, as far as I know, there wasn't any effort made to maximize speed so that the inconvenience could be minimized.
So I think one of the things that comes up with all the meetings that all the meetings, which is really mostly with residents, although it has involved some business owners along Colorado Boulevard, is, I think much of what Michael is speaking about is we feel like we've been left out of the conversation. We feel like we're being told what's happening to us. We're not part of the decision-making process or the inquiry process. And it feels like there's a lot of lack of transparency. There is this supposed meeting coming up to pick a plan for Colorado Boulevard, and yet there are a ton of questions that they should be able to answer that aren't being answered. We don't know who this board is. We're not allowed to know who it is. We don't know when the meeting's going to be. You can't attend it. And we feel like there's no information that really warrants making a decision at this standpoint. And so the issues and problems with even having a conversation with Dottie. And so I think that individuals that are being impacted and that are along these routes, who also are the citizens and the taxpayers that are living in these areas, that are having their businesses here, and that are funding a lot of things, don't have a seat at the table. I went to the Clayton Center, which was, a bunch of poster boards with no dialogue, people that you'd ask questions at the poster boards and no one can answer any pertinent question for you. And those kinds of things seem to be considered feasibility studies. And the questionnaires that Dottie has put out, you have less than 1,000 people that are answering these, and you're in fact impacting tens of thousands of individuals. And so that's the data that you're using to then move forward with decisions. So this real frustration and concern, and then on top of it with Colorado Boulevard, the justifications for even really doing it down Colorado Boulevard, which, you know, again, from what all the stuff we've been looking at too, is it's a route, like where are people taking it? And so Colorado Boulevard is predominantly residential. You have a handful of businesses in certain areas, but I can tell you that most of the residents living along there aren't gonna walk 8 to 10 blocks to get on a bus to then go grocery shop or go shop at Home Depot. And then if you are reducing the bus stops by 50%, that creates even more of a problem. So there's just a lot of things with Colorado Boulevard that don't make sense.
So I've been asked to just hop back in, and I don't want to negate any of her experience. I just have a very different experience of the access to decision makers on Colorado. So I was the president of the RNO in Hilltop. So I lived 3 blocks off Colorado Boulevard, and we're that place with no sidewalks and no right of way to use and all that stuff. I was invited to be on the stakeholder group for Colorado Boulevard, and those meetings are open. I'm happy to send invitations to anyone who wants one. People can come. And Ryan, who's the project lead on that project, is wildly accessible. So before the public meeting we talked about, I said, hey, if you're coming to my neighborhood, why don't we have coffee before? So an hour and a half before the meeting started, because he needed some time to set up, we sat and had coffee, and I said, you know, this is what I'm thinking these days, or this is what I'm hearing. And so my experience is they're very transparent, they're very open to input, they are desperate for it, in fact. So my experience is very different.
Can we really quick go back to Josiah and go back to you, Jill? Sorry.
I think I was gonna say, that kind of bouncing off of you guys, we actually didn't qualify for the grants because we couldn't show a 20% decrease in sales, but what they don't know is the bottom line is the minute our construction started and our sales started declining, I invested 10x in marketing, and we hired a marketing specialist to kind of specialize in social media and everything about marketing. So our bottom line has gone destroyed while our top line is improving, which I'm blessed about. And I think they call us an anomaly on Colfax, which I think is kind of our drive-through model too, which is great. But I think like you were saying, I think there's maybe some automatic approvals or some other ways to look at businesses. And also, I wrote a scathing article about Denver Water. I called it Denver Water Hates Small Businesses. They have asked me to also take that down. It's also on my news. But we've actually never been a business where we did have construction in front of us, because the lead replacement project started 2 months after we opened, and then that went right into BRT construction. So it's always been construction for us. And maybe Denver just never does construction right, is kind of the vibe that I'm getting. So that's honestly.
I just wanted to pick up on one comment. A question comes up a lot, why Colorado Boulevard? And when I hear the commentary in this regard, it reminds me of that yoga bear saying, nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded. People say, why would anybody want to take transit on Colorado Boulevard? There's nowhere to go on Colorado Boulevard. And yet people also say, Colorado's way too congested, it's too full of cars. Well, really, there's a lot of people who want to get up and down Colorado Boulevard. And those are exactly the kind of corridors where transit makes sense, because you have a lot of people trying to travel along similar routes to similar destinations. And there are major regional destinations that everybody's trying to get to on Colorado Boulevard. There's the zoo, there's the Museum of Nature and Science, there's City Park Jazz, there's the National Jewish Center. It's actually a major route to the airport. The airport recently mapped out the zip codes of people who are flying out of the airport. A lot of them live along Colorado Boulevard. And if you think about transit works best as a network, just like our streets work best as a network, right? Like Colorado, Federal, Colfax, they are major streets in our transportation network. And we can drive pretty much anywhere in Denver because we have this network of major streets. Similarly, for transit to really work for people, we have to have a network of north, south, east, west streets. And so looking at the streets where most people are traveling, on a regular basis to get to similar destinations, that's where it makes sense to start building the network of transit. And that's why Colorado Boulevard already has one of the highest transit usage rates in the network, even with the terrible sidewalks, even with the buses stuck in congestion and being slow and unreliable. A lot of people are still using it because it gets them where they need to go. So there's a lot of latent demand there that we could be tapping into.
And I would just add, as somebody who lives kind of close to southern Colorado, to me, it's not at all a residential street. It's a highly commercial street going basically from the Wilshire Golf Course well past the I-25 crossing. There are tons of businesses, major retail, quite a ways up until you do eventually get to a more residential area. So, there are a lot of places you can go in Colorado, for sure.
I wouldn't disagree with the comments made here about Colorado Boulevard. I think there needs to be a deeper analysis. Again, yes, there are businesses. The question though is, again, who's getting on it to go to those types of businesses that are more, again, functional services? And if we get rid of half the bus routes, and I mean, I do feel that probably the real rationale for Colorado Boulevard is that it's a transit connector route, and that's the primary reason that it's being suggested. So when I look at the practicalities and the usage and the sidewalk issue and just the overwhelming response from people up and down the boulevard, not just residential but commercial, who are very opposed to this project and feel like they need a lot more questions and answers. And I think part of it too is one topic I haven't seen addressed at all with all of this is safety. There are a lot of people that don't want to get on RTD transportation because they don't feel it's safe. They don't feel that it's reliable. And then we look at the partnership with RTD, and if we look at RTD's history and its track record, I think all of that is concerning. Like, this is an organization that we're supposed to rely on, and can this pay for itself? Can they be a reliable partner? I don't think that we've seen a lot of good history with that too. And again, the safety issue I don't think can be ignored. And what's RTD doing about that as well?
I'll just kind of, I guess, try to address some of the comments about RTD. And certainly when I ran for the board, I was extremely concerned about the safety or disorder issue. I mean, frankly, it was the issue of a lot of drug abusers being on our properties and our vehicles. And the good news is that that situation has dramatically improved. It's not perfect by any means, but the number of calls that have come in about people on the trains has declined dramatically, and around the stations, and I've seen it too. So we really have improved the safety a great deal. We've hired a lot of police officers, which is, I think, a big part of why that's succeeded. I think in terms of reliability, I mean, our least reliable service is our buses. And the reason our buses are the least reliable is because they have to compete with traffic. And you can't really control how much automobile traffic there's going to be on any given street. And so we have, on average, 80% reliability with buses when we have, at least when there's not maintenance going on with the trains, we have 90% plus with the trains. And that's one of the reasons why BRT is such a great solution, because it allows the buses to operate with the same reliability as the trains if you do it correctly.
I was going to add one more question just because it was a common one I saw on Nextdoor conversations. And I know the answer, but I would like it to be clarified. One of the biggest concerns that I was reading was that the BRT was putting more pedestrians in harm's way because they're in the center of the street. Can I have a few of you answer, or anyone who would like to just say, I'm sorry. But if you have even noticed anything outside of your business that you think you can contribute to that. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind just kind of answering what your findings have been or what your explanation for that argument is.
So Mike gave the statistics for Federal Boulevard about how dangerous it is. Colorado Boulevard is also incredibly dangerous. About 18 people per year on average are killed or seriously injured on Colorado Boulevard. Colfax Avenue, before the BRT construction started, was also one of the most deadly streets in the city. And there's a reason that those streets are the most deadly. It's because they are currently designed like highways to move as many cars as fast as possible. And the way you make those streets safer is you transform them to create more space for people who are outside of cars, who are walking and biking and taking transit, and actually reducing the space for cars, because that reinforces slower, safer speeds for the drivers, and it shortens the distance that people have to cross to get from one side of the street to the other. So from our perspective, it's a real win-win to do these bus rapid transit projects, because you're both making options other than driving much more attractive and convenient and practical ways for getting around, and you're also making the street safer for everybody on the street, including drivers. A huge proportion of our fatal traffic crashes are people in cars. We are all dying because of these highway-style streets that are cutting through our urban areas. And when you talk about having stations in the middle of the street, if you've ever taken transit, you have to cross the street at some point. Even if you get on the bus on this side of the street, when you come back, the bus will be on the other side of the street and you'll have to cross. And so it's inherent that you're gonna have to cross the street. When it's in the middle of the street, you only have to cross halfway. And you only have to look for cars coming from one direction, and you have a safe space to wait in the middle of the street. And now you have much calmer traffic on either side of you that's moving more slowly. And so even with just the construction of Colfax BRT, because it was somewhat mimicking this reduction in space for cars, traffic, serious injuries, and fatalities dropped dramatically as soon as the construction started. And we expect to see that will continue after the construction ends because of the redesign of the street. And we're gonna start seeing it's actually functioning like a truly people-friendly main street, not an urban highway.
Well, we get it on safety. I am trying to live a nice, long, healthy life. And so I walk every day. I live 3 blocks off Colorado Boulevard. I walk in the street because there are no sidewalks to Colorado Boulevard, and then I cross my fingers and I cross Colorado Boulevard and I go over to Cherry Creek and I have some lunch and I come back. And I did it today. I crossed Colorado Boulevard, got up on foot, and I do it almost every day. It is shocking how dangerous it feels. I also walked the 4 miles when there was the public meeting on Colorado Boulevard BRT at Martin Luther King. I walked from my house 4 miles. It was terrifying. So the current condition is shockingly dangerous. So we can make it better, and BRT will make it better. But I want to add one more public health safety problem to all of this, because there are lots of reasons to do BRT. Transportation is only one of them. Transportation's contribution to shockingly terrible air quality is another reason to do it. So for those of you who may not know, Denver is in severe non-attainment for the ground level ozone standard. That means we aren't just violating it by a little, we are violating it by a shocking amount. That is 70 parts per billion in the air of ozone at ground level. If you take a look at the Colorado Department of Public Health website, you think that's going to contribute to a little bit of asthma and make some people a little bit uncomfortable, and maybe you shouldn't go running on a high ozone day. But here's the real deal. Emerging evidence has shown that both short-term and long-term exposure to ozone at concentrations below the current regulatory standard were associated with increased mortality due to respiratory and cardiovascular diseases. Worldwide, ozone is responsible for several hundreds of thousands of premature deaths and tens of millions of asthma-related emergency room visits annually. So we are living with dangerous air, and we have to do something about it. And at the same time, if we can make it safe to cross Colorado Boulevard, we should do that too.
I would just add to that, transit is a far safer way to travel than an automobile that you're driving yourself. The number of fatal accidents on a bus, or even accidents at all, is just far lower. So the more trips that are switched over to the BRT away from driving on Colorado or any other street, the more lives will be saved, aside from all the other improvements that have been mentioned. And I'd also like to add that, I personally would feel much safer with an RTD bus driver whose job it is to drive all the time, and probably isn't going to be looking at their phone while they're driving or fiddling with the radio or whatever. Their job is to drive and drive safely. They're penalized if they don't. And so if somebody does run in front of the bus, unlike most of the vehicles that you would see on Colorado, you're more likely to have a bus driver who stops in time to not kill that person than I think your average automobile driver. So that's a lot of that.
I was able to attend the Hilltop meeting, Michael, that you're talking about. And I know one of the things that Ryan had mentioned too, and I'm just curious again about ridership. So it sounds as though the goal that was presented there was that by 2047, the hope was that ridership on Colorado Boulevard would increase by 2,600 riders. And I guess to me that seems like a very small number of riders for the cost, for the amount of time and construction. And, again, I wonder if we've looked at some other, solutions. We obviously have individuals that we need to make sure who utilize transportation regularly, that they have access to it, that they can get to where they need to go. But I was surprised at that stat. And then there was a website that's Greater Denver Transit, and they had a slide on there that said from 2019 to 2025, and it was looking at ridership for all of RTD, so not just these particular routes, and light rail, and that in 2025, ridership increased by 55,000 over all routes. But then under that, it said it will take us 738 years to return to 2019 ridership levels. So, I see stats like this, and I see data like this, and these are kind of the numbers that I can't wrap my head around. And so, how do we solve? Is that an RTD issue? Is that I don't know what it is, but I hear those numbers, and then I'm like, well, how are we going to do this? What are these projects? The amount of money and time, and then I see statistics like that, and then we look historically at some other projects that RTD has done or that we've done for transportation. That by the time they're completed, are they already obsolete? I mean, a question that's come up at another meeting was, the concept of driverless cars and vehicles that are happening now, and Is that something that's going to drastically improve safety and change how people choose to, get around? So I just don't know the answer to those questions.
Jill and then
We tend to treat travel models like they're crystal balls, and we plug in, here's our plan for transit or lanes, miles, or sidewalks, and it's gonna give us an answer that is a truth set in stone of this is what future traffic patterns will be like. The reality that a lot of traffic engineers will not share with you is there is a ton of assumptions that go into these models. And they actually are not that great at predicting future traffic patterns, particularly when you're talking about non-car forms of transportation. These models were invented to build our highway system and to predict driving in suburban conditions, and they do a terrible job of predicting transit ridership, walking, biking. And so I think it's honestly kind of worthless to be looking at travel models, and what we should be thinking about is, what kind of city do we want to have? And then we build for that city. Do we want a city where the only option people have is to drive everywhere they go and every other form of transportation is unsafe, impractical, and undignified? Or do we want to give people real mobility options, and we actually want to prioritize the options that are best in terms of air pollution, that are the most affordable, that are the safest, that use space most efficiently, a very precious resource in a city, and we build for that. And the research has actually shown that when you build it, people will come. When we've expanded highways over and over and over again, people drive. When you actually start building a functional transit network that's fast, frequent, reliable, and connected, people will take transit. Will Colorado Boulevard BRT all by itself be the magic bullet that all of a sudden we get 200% increase in transit ridership? No. But is it a step towards the vision of having a fast, frequent, reliable network? And so that's the question we should be asking ourselves. What do we want? And let's build for what we want.
So I'm going to show you how you lose a city council election. Get the speech you're about to give in front of a bunch of NIMBYs in City Council District 5, because then they don't vote for you. I had a good time running though, because I said what I thought. So here's the real problem. I recommend a very nice pamphlet to you. You can read it really quickly. It's a book called Abundance. The reason that I call it a pamphlet is the idea is just repeated like 14 times from chapter to chapter, and it says the same thing over and over again. So read the first chapter and then give it to someone to read. It's a really simple premise. It's a really simple premise. We get in the way of the things that we actually say we want. So we want affordable housing, not public housing that people get into if they're desperately poor. But we want all of us, market rate and public housing, to be affordable to all of us. And yet, we build shocking barriers to actually being able to have that thing. I was on transportation. I was just in Spain. I went from Madrid to Sevilla on a rapid train, and it was magnificent. And now we're going to build a front range mess from from Fort Collins to Longmont to Boulder to Wheat Ridge to Arvada because we're going to mess around with it instead of actually just going from Fort Collins to Denver to Colorado Springs at 150 miles an hour, which is what we should do. The problem is that we are in our own way, and we cut these things back, and we give them short shrift, and we do them halfway. We really need to start thinking about abundance. What do we really want? I want to go from Denver to Colorado Springs in 45 minutes. Not an hour and 45 minutes. At 45 miles an hour on a train we spend $2 billion to build. So the problem isn't that we are building transit that is too impactful. We are building transit, we need to build transit that is way more impactful than the slightly okay versions we have imagined for ourselves. So we need to be doing radically better at transportation alternatives so that they are real alternatives. And the one thing we haven't talked about, so I'm adding it here just because I'm going to do that now, we have not talked about affordability.
The average new car in America costs $50,000. So if you live in Sun Valley, you can't have one. Not a new one. You can have something that you have to hold together with baling wire and duct tape. But what we really need is for people who have very little resources to have great ways to move around that cost them next to nothing. And we can do that if we're brave enough, if we are bold enough. But we aren't bold enough. We are watering down these things and then they're not worth having. That's our real problem.
And that will get you not elected to District 5.
Yeah, I'd just like to kind of comment on the RTD ridership situation. Definitely RTD's ridership dropped tremendously post-COVID. The main reason for that is that people are not commuting to work like they used to. They're definitely not commuting downtown at anywhere near the levels that they used to. Our downtown has been notably singled out by the Wall Street Journal as being sort of America's emptiest downtown, and I do think it's true that for various reasons, Denver's downtown has recovered less of its activity post-COVID than most other cities. We have one of the worst office markets there as well. I would also, I think that RTD, we definitely are very focused on ridership and improving ridership. And I mean, for sure, what I think all of us on the board are very excited about is the process that we're going to have coming up to reorganize our transit system, especially the buses, so that it's not so much designed just to deliver people downtown for a 9-to-5 job, but in fact offers a lot more service at other times and into the night, and doesn't view itself as primarily serving that downtown commuter like it was, or certainly designed for decades ago. So I think that kind of strategy has worked in WMATA, the Washington D.C. Transit Agency. They also haven't recovered their weekly commuting traffic, but they've actually exceeded their weekend traffic because they've changed kind of what they're going for, and that's I think something that we want to aspire to too. And then the last comment I'll just make real quick is that definitely automated vehicles are, I think, is really something that is exciting and something that transit agencies need to think about. What I like to think about is not so much automated cars, which I think will be great in certain situations, but automated buses. If we could automate, if you have the technology to automate a car that basically has to be able to go anywhere in the city, you should be able to have the technology to automate a bus that essentially has a fixed route, especially something like a BRT where you're taking out a lot of the complication already. And if we can do that, we could triple the amount of service we provide by, frankly, taking that bus driver out of the cost equation. And there is a lot of opportunity there.
Okay. So who should Denver be prioritizing the most? Its residents, its commuters, or its businesses? Who, as of right now, who should Denver be putting the most? I'm trying to rephrase this question so it works for everyone. But yeah, who do you think Denver should be focusing most on prioritizing currently with the city's growth?
I think it's a difficult question. I think that all are important. And I think that the area that you're looking at, where they're going to be, everyone needs to be part of the conversation because they're all impacted in different ways. And so I would find it hard to really pick a particular one. I think they're all relevant. So, I would suppose that if we're looking at who's utilizing this the most, then we're saying, okay, commuters, and what kind of way we facilitate that, as people on the board here have talked. So I think though that you can't negate the impact on the business and the residential, solely to focus on the commuter.
I would argue it's a false choice. I mean, we're all residents, commuters, and we all patronize businesses. Businesses need their employees to be able to get to work. They need residents to be able to access their businesses. People who live here, many of them also work here. Many of them want to be able to get to their neighborhood businesses. The thing is, we need to connect to each other. And the question is, what is the best way that we can connect with each other in Denver that's healthy, that's safe, that's affordable, that's pleasant, that's convenient? And I think oftentimes the same answer applies. Whether you're talking about somebody getting to work, or somebody getting to school, or somebody visiting their neighbor, oftentimes transit is a great answer. It's not the only answer. And so we need to give people choices. The problem today is we are not giving people choices. We are saying, you have to drive everywhere you go, whether you want to or not. And that is failing all of us. It's failing businesses, it's failing commuters, and it's failing residents.
I think in these public questions, we have to think more about the people who don't have choices, whose economic circumstances and the reality of their existence is that they are boxed in at every turn. And those are the people that I think we have to spend our time with and gear our public policy toward. So we at our TMA, we spend a lot of time in West Denver and not so much time in Golden, because people in Golden have resources. They have big houses, and big, retirement accounts and lots of things, and they can pick which car they want to drive today. But when we're working in Sun Valley and we're working in Villa Park and we're working in the West Denver neighborhoods where people don't have a lot of wherewithal, they're really faced with hard choices. And so if we build a transportation system that makes their lives better, that gives them access to education, that gives them access to jobs, that lets them get to their families who might live across town easily and cheaply, that will be a transportation system that we will all love. And it will work for people who have greater needs, but choose to do something that isn't very expensive. And so I think we have to think about people who are living with disabilities and their access, and I think we have to think about people who don't have a lot of financial wherewithal to make just any choice. And I gotta tell you that, I live in Ridgeland, and it's gotten shocking. I couldn't live in the neighborhood. I couldn't afford to buy into the neighborhood I live in now, and I know many of us are in that circumstance. I'm surrounded by tech bros and finance bros and people who are running, venture capital funds, and buying $5 million houses across the street from me, which is just more shocking than I can tell you. They don't need your help. When you think about what government should do, they don't need your help. We need to be focused on people who actually need help.
I mean, I'll say that even though obviously you have to focus on all three groups, I'll say that at least as far as Denver goes, and to some extent as far as RTD goes, I think where we've been failing the most has been on really doing enough for businesses. I think Denver's become a less friendly place to do business for a lot of businesses over the last recent years. I think we're far too quick to impose challenges on businesses that aren't really necessary, and far too quick to do things that are just straight out anti-business, like declare a moratorium on data centers for no real reason. So, and I think also RTD, and one of the things I hope to change is our greatest new employment center growth area is in Cherry Creek right now, and it's also one of our most poorly served places in terms of transit. And I think part of the reason for that is historically RTD has not looked at where people work. They've looked at where people live in terms of designing service perhaps too much, and also has sort of looked at the income levels of people and have said, well, we want to make sure we serve people with low incomes, and of course we do, and Cherry Creek has high income, so maybe they don't need as much service. But they also have the only healthy office market possibly in the Denver metro area, and a strong market for other amenities too. Why aren't we doing more to serve that market? Because there are a lot of people who work there who don't live in Cherry Creek and would like to be able to get there conveniently and inexpensively.
Okay, I have a million more questions, but I kind of just opened this up. I can keep asking questions, but I was going to give the audience an opportunity to ask questions of any of our panelists. If anyone's interested, I can keep going. Yes.
Same 3-minute rule applies.
Will you hand him the microphone?
I get 3 minutes for a question. I'm curious about, do you guys know the profile of the people who use the Colfax public transportation system now? And from what I understand, it's like $250,000 for 10 miles from Union Station to Aurora. How many people use that corridor now? And how many more will use it? How many buses will be running and how often will the buses stop? And then where they have the stops, will people have more options for continuing on mass transit at the places where the buses stop? So you would actually, my bigger question is that has any mid-sized or small city successfully operated a mass transit system that's not London or New York that like goes everywhere and you can get a bus in 5 minutes every time that you go? But I did want to get the basics of what actually would be served on Colfax.
I can't really answer that question specifically as it relates to Colfax. I'm not that's not really in my district, and I don't really track things that way, I guess. I mean, I will say that the thing that drives transit usage everywhere is frequency. If you want there to be more transit usage, you need to increase the frequency of the vehicle coming by. And for the most part in Denver with buses, we don't have anything that comes more frequently than every 15 minutes. Probably more of our routes are every half hour, and we still have a fair number that it's every hour. I do believe, my understanding with the Colorado or the Colfax BRT is that it will be a round-the-clock service, which is an improvement. I doubt that there is a final decision at this point on how frequently it will. 4.5 minutes, is that going to be round the clock during peak periods? And so, with coming from the RTD perspective, what I would hope is that we can keep that 4.5 minute service late into the night. I mean, Colfax is certainly a street that is frequented by many people very late, and frankly, probably they can use transit even more usefully during the late night than during the day in many cases, or should be using it at least. So that's a decision we can make. And I think if we do make that decision, we will find that the ridership increases dramatically. Now, I do know that Colfax is one of our highest ridership and most frequent routes right now. So, it's probably one of our most efficient routes, but I don't know the exact ridership.
So I think once the construction mess is over, the goal in my mind for Colfax BRT is to have that significant investment in infrastructure be an economic engine for Colfax and the areas around it. And so for those of you who don't like density, you can put your fingers in your ears now. What should happen is that transportation asset will be so desirable, not just to people who are transit dependent, but people who actually need to get someplace and can choose to leave their Tesla at home, that they will want to ride it because it's fast and it's clean and the platforms are easy and it's cool and it's kind of trainish. And then people will think, oh, if I lived on Colfax, wouldn't this be cool? And then they will invest in condominiums and luxury apartments that are 10 or 15 stories tall along Colfax. And so this will be part of accommodating all the growth that's going to happen in population in Colorado and revitalizing Colfax once they mess it up with construction and getting lots of people who want to go to Lilac Coffee to buy some coffee. And then it's an upward cycle economically so that the BRT vehicles are packed to the gills. So it would be great if it turned out like Japan, where you have men in white gloves who will shove you into the subway because you are going to get in there like packed like sardines. That would be wildly successful if it's so crowded and so desirable that people want to move there, people want to open their businesses there, and people want to ride that thing to get all the places that they need to go. And then we do that over and over again by making federal that desirable.
As Matt mentioned, Colfax is already one of the highest used routes. It outperforms several of the rail lines in terms of ridership and all that development that Mike wants to see. A lot of it is very likely going to happen. It's in the pipeline. The regional forecast a ton of growth along the Colfax corridor. If we don't improve transit, what are those people going to do? They're going to drive, and you're going to get a lot of diversion of cars off of Colfax. If we improve transit, buses can suck up a lot more people and become packed and keep that traffic off of the adjacent streets. So it's counterintuitive, but in fact, increasing transit and reducing space for cars can actually help with congestion and diversion, whereas the status quo, congestion is going to get worse. And if people don't have options than driving, what are they going to do? They're going to drive into the neighborhood streets. I also wanted to touch on bus stop spacing because that came up a number of times. That's part of what makes buses slow is if they stop every single block, especially if you're going several miles, that can take forever and be super frustrating. So yes, they are reducing the number of bus stops and spacing them out, but that can actually make your overall trip faster. You might have to walk a few minutes longer, but your transit trip is so much shorter that in fact your overall trip is faster. And research again has shown people are willing to walk further for higher quality transit. You need to think about people with disabilities and older adults and others who have challenges, and there are solutions for them in terms of paratransit and thoughtful placement of the stops. But stop consolidation is part of making it a higher functioning transit system that people actually want to use.
Is there a real date for when it will be open?
So the section from downtown to Colorado is supposed to be open by the end of the year, and then the remainder will be done in 2027.
I'm curious too from the group up here who knows more about some of these details of RTD. I know that the largest growing population in Colorado is individuals over the age of 65. And in the next 10 years, that is supposed to increase by 35%. We also know that we're having a decrease in younger people, we're having fewer families. And obviously, I think there are some really different, unique needs there. I also certainly understand the concept of what you just said, Jill, where you, obviously, if you have more frequent stops, that's slowing things down. And yet just the reality of getting people, especially some of these more challenged populations, to have to walk that much further. I saw a pilot program by a gentleman I knew was running for a city council position, Joel Cox, and he was looking at an RTD study that addressed the fact that, I want to say, if you're more than a mile from a stop, you're 39% less likely to get on it. And so, some of those incredible barriers, and then obviously when you get off a stop, how close are you to where you want to need to be? And I think that continues to be one of the challenges and barriers in Denver with our infrastructure in terms of getting some people to get on it. You know, I need to walk further, or maybe I need to drive to a transit station where I'm parking to then get on, you know, whether it's a train or a bus. So I just think those are some things, and, you know, what is transportation looking at for those specific populations, because it's a significant issue coming up for us.
The good news is nobody's planning bus stops a mile apart. Like Colfax, you know, in the more dense section, they're about a third of a mile apart. Which, remember, that means to get to a stop, even if you're starting in the middle, the most you're going is a sixth of a mile to get to that stop. So just to clarify about what we talk about right now, there literally are some places where the bus stops every block. And so we're just talking about expanding it by that little bit. And you're absolutely right. There are some people who even a sixth of a mile, they can't walk. And that's exactly why we have paratransit service that provides door-to-door. It will pick you up at your front door and take you where you need to go. And we absolutely need to invest in complementary paratransit service to make sure that it's available for the people who need it. And then we also need to be thinking about those first last mile connections. I mean, that's why these pedestrian improvements are so important, because people are also much more willing to walk further if it's a pleasant and safe walk, as opposed to what it's like to currently walk along Colorado Boulevard. And we need to make sure that we have good options, like you mentioned, you whispered to me, the micro mobility options, the scooters and bikes, those are wildly popular, and we need to make sure that those are affordable and that those are closely linked with the transit system. And so, yes, we need to be planning to make the system work great for everybody. Right now, it works terribly for most people.
I'd just like to say that, yeah, we do have an aging population, and what that means is we need much better transit, because we already have a situation where, you know, we make it easy, no matter how old you get, no matter how infirm you get, to continue to have a driver's license. And at some point, the elderly become as dangerous as teenagers driving around. And so you don't want that. You know, in order to prevent that, you really need to provide much better transit options, and the urgency to do that is greater, because people are living longer, and there's more old people, and that's the way it's looking like it's going to be. I mean, the other solution is, and Michael mentioned, it's a density issue. If you can live right on top of a bus stop or a train stop or whatever, because there's a 20-story or 25-story building there, and then you can just go down the elevator and get on the bus or the train. I mean, that's the best possible solution. That's as easy as it gets. And so Denver and all the cities in the Front Range need to be thinking about that, and thinking, how can we come through with our transit-oriented development and raise the level of density around transit stops to be, you know, far, far, far higher than it is in most of the metro area right now. So that would be my comment.
There's a gentleman in the podium.
Thank you very much. Very quickly, just two examples of BRT systems that work for smaller cities than Denver. Cleveland's Helpline, $9 billion of transit investment has happened because of that BRT, and Eugene working. The question I have for the group here, RTD's service level right now, we are running about 76% of the bus and rail service than we were in 2019. So as we talk about ridership recovery, I think that is the level we have to also set, while also being cognizant of downtown's office recovery issues and whatnot. Building good transit, whether that's BRT and dedicated infrastructure, is expensive and does come with trade-offs. The question I have is, as we talk about, you know, business costs to businesses and costs to the community, at what point do we put, how do we weigh those costs versus the opportunity cost of not having a better transit system and having the opportunities there? especially when we talk about business loss. Like just in the news yesterday, 7 businesses in downtown Denver and Rhino, where there is no construction, went just closed on one day. Those are not on Colfax. Those aren't experiencing the construction issues that are happening on Colfax. So I'm just curious, like when we talk about business impacts and construction impacts, like are we conflating just a very painful business environment, which I work a block off of Colfax and I have great empathy for small businesses, but are we conflating real economic impact with construction impacts?
So I'm happy to just give a quick one since I got the microphone. I think let me just put my own resource on the table as a negotiable item. I am working along the W line. It would not bother me at all if the RTD board and RTD staff took a good hard look at whether they can afford to continue to run the W line in the near term. And certainly whether they can afford to run it the way they run it now. And if we need to mothball the W line for some time, while we actually try to provide service people aren't getting that they actually need, because there aren't a lot of people commuting from Golden to Union Station. It's just not happening. And so there are a lot of empty trains on the W line. We have to be brave enough to say it's all in play. And if the region has changed post-COVID and how we work has changed post-COVID, and we've done a bunch of lines to one central place and that no longer makes sense, then let's just stop continuing it as if it's going to fix itself, because maybe it isn't. And so I think we have to whiteboard it all, blank slate. What do we need to stop doing that we're currently doing, and what do we need to do now that we aren't doing, and let's see if we can rebound to something like 100% of RTD service wherever that belongs. And that may mean shrinking the district, canceling the B line. I got them all. I got a long list. They're all wildly unpopular. But it's time we put all the unpopular things together and figure out which things we can actually afford to do that will make RTD whole and put service where it's really needed.
I want to speak to the inflation. It's just hard to be a small business.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question, and I think those two realities can be true at the same time. Like the fact that just having a business in Denver in general is probably not great. The support isn't there, but also probably that the construction on Colfax probably isn't helping businesses at all. So I think those two things can be true. I think there's a wider, bigger issue that can be addressed with the city and just how how Denver treats small businesses, and maybe just like landlords too. Maybe that's part of the equation, is that commercial rent exponentially increases after a 5-year lease is done. So I'm sure there's a wider argument to that, but I also think, addressing your question, those two things can be true at the same time. Just economic factors in general in Denver, and also just the fact that this BRT construction isn't helping small businesses. It's definitely not improving them for sure at this current state. So.
And I know some of this was brought up too, but I think my thought on that too is, again, the business climate and the lack of the friendliness in Denver. We're the 6th most regulated state in the country, and there's a lot of regulations on small businesses, especially in the city, that make it difficult. There's also the small businesses. Most likely you're on a triple net lease. In addition to paying your rent, you're paying the taxes, you're paying the insurance, you're paying the utilities, you're paying the repairs. We have an increase in the minimum wage, which we all understand the importance of that, and yet that's another factor with businesses and inflation. So I just think it's a real challenging issue that's been brought up.
If you guys are willing to go over, we can get both people, but I believe you were first. You have a question, sir? Yeah.
Thanks. It's a question masquerading as a statement.
3 minutes.
Yeah. Yes, there's a lot. Yes, there's a lot of conflation going on. My name is Frank Locantore. I'm mostly known for being married to Jill on the panel. Second, mostly known for being the executive director for the Colfax Ave Business Improvement District, which spans from basically the state capital to Josephine. 185 businesses on Colfax proper, and we've had our occupancy rate has basically not changed during the 20 months of construction. We've had businesses close, and we've had other businesses open. We've had 2 apartment buildings open. To Michael's point, it's like it's already happening. The Vixen is open, the Novel is open, whereas Smiley's laundromat used to be will open in a year or so. Another one will open in a few years. So in a few years, we're going to have 1,000 more addresses on Colfax proper, and Barna, that took over the space where the Irish Snug used to be. For any soccer fans in the area, with FIFA and the World Cup, you should go to Barna, the former Irish Snug. They specifically opened on Colfax. This guy knows what he's doing because of the BRT. And he wants his employees to get to work without having to have a car. Businesses are experiencing pain, some more than others. That's not deniable. Purple Haze in our section of Colfax just closed last week, but 8 Purple Hazes closed last week. And not all of them are on Colfax, to your point. There's natural churn of businesses all of the time. And we honestly can't point to a single business in our section of Colfax that has closed specifically and only because of the BRT construction. In fact, in most cases, it was probably seen to be a minor case. And I do feel your pain, and we talk to businesses all the time, and you're not in our district, but I know the struggles that you and others are having. And there is a lot more that the city can do. Being just quicker is the way that they could do it. Giving some kind of like forgiveness on sales tax and property tax would be another thing too. But if we're not going to do these capital construction projects because we're afraid of doing it, then we're just not going to be able to progress. Thanks.
Can you get Q House reopened?
That's not my section. We're talking like supply chain,
Get it open
tariffs, all of these things, the fluctuation.
That was the gentleman in that. Oh, did you want to respond? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sure you like a question.
I don't know. I think that's an interesting statement, and I appreciate that empathy too. But I think in your statement too, it was boasting about businesses closing but then businesses opening, and I don't know if that's something to be, boasting about, just because.
Not boasting.
No. Sorry, that's not the right word. But just in your, I'm just speaking on that sentence there. But just. I think we should be praising the longevity of businesses, not the closing of ones and then the immediate opening of another one. Because in general, I think businesses do have a 3-year runway for the most part. I think enough business owners plan for 3 years in nonprofit. And I think it's really the businesses that can last past those 3 years that are really the real winners. Like new businesses have a lot more money than older businesses, and that's just a fact because they have a lot more hope. There's a lot more glimmer in their eyes, and they have a deeper pocket. So I think we should look at not only the opening new businesses, but also the longevity of businesses that have been there and that should be there if it weren't for construction or whatever. But maybe the analysis needs to be done where we need to control for economic factors, but also take into account the factors of the construction as well. Because, it can seem that the economy, and then the city is obviously a factor in that, but I think on top of that, the compounding factor is also the fact that the construction is happening as well. So, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll speak one more in. I'm sorry, he's been holding it up for a minute.
Thank you. I have two things I'd like to ask the panel to react to. The first is I had the pleasure of co-chairing the advisory committee for Blueprint Denver, which is our new long-range city plan that the community gave input to from 2016 to its adoption in 2019. And it laid out a grid of BRT for the city. Each of these we've talked about is on that plan, and there are others on that plan. So the first thing I'd like the panel to react to is, what is the importance of a frequent grid to transit? Because people aren't just commuting to the center of town and back out, it's not a radial pattern. What's the importance of a frequent grid? And the second is, what are your thoughts on the famous quote by Enrique Peñalosa, who said, an advanced city is not one where the poor have cars, but where the rich ride transit. Thanks.
I did. I love that last one. I've said to Ryan, the measure of your success on Colfax Colorado BRT is one of my neighbors, a woman, alone, feels safe to walk to the Colorado BRT with her $3,000 handbag to go to Whole Foods down Colorado Boulevard because she's going way faster than she would if she were in her Mercedes, and then safely walk back again, hop on the BRT, and be home faster because she left her car in the garage, in the 5-car garage, and carried the $3,000 handbag. It is essential that the transit ridership look at the city. Because if it's for them, then we don't go for it. But if it's for us, we do. And so it has to be us. It has to be all of us. With respect to the grid, yes, in theory, and really hard in practice. So I know one of the corridors that's on there is Alameda. I don't know how you get across University on Alameda without condemning country club. Like, it just doesn't. So yes, in theory, and really, really, really hard in practice in some very pinched places that need some serious creativity. And I don't know, we are just gonna have to beam people over to the west side when you get to, I don't know what the answer is there. But yes, I think we should try, and yes, we're gonna hit some really, really hard places to do that. Grid arena. They're tired.
Yes, there are those hard points, but there's also a lot of low-hanging fruit, and it doesn't have to be full-blown BRT on every corridor immediately. I mean, I think Matt alluded to it earlier. Frequency is the key, right? That you can literally walk out to the bus stop and you don't even have to check the schedule. You just know the bus is going to come. And when you have a grid, you've got a combination of east-west routes and north-south routes that you can combine in any pattern that makes sense for you to get from wherever you want to be to wherever you're trying to go. And yes, that requires a transfer. People tend to hate transfers, but the frequency helps with the transfers, right? Because you get off one bus and you know the next bus is going to come within a few minutes. And it's that freedom that we're looking for. And that's what you were describing for that resident. If people feel more free moving around the city by transit, we have won. Because we're increasing freedom and we're doing it in a way that's better for the environment, that's more affordable, that makes more efficient use of space. I mean, talk about trying to figure out how to get BRT around down Alameda. What if we were still trying to widen streets and we wanted to condemn buildings to add a lane? That would be even worse. But in the space that we have, without having to widen the streets, we can increase frequency and we can reallocate that space that we have. That used to be for cars, now we can say it's for transit, and the goal is to increase freedom by doing so.
I mean, What I like to imagine is a future where we have shuttle buses, automated shuttle buses going up and down every sort of halfway major thoroughfare in the city, coming by every 2 or 3 minutes, 24/7, and everybody being comfortable riding them because we have made the city safe enough and orderly enough that people don't have some of the characters that we see every day to fear. That's the vision that I hope to go for, and we can provide all of that because after probably more than 100 years without advancing in technology in any significant way, public transit can take advantage of some of these technological productivity improvements and be able to provide all that service all across the metro area for no more money than we're currently spending, and perhaps even without any fares for anybody, because at that point it'll be so much service and so efficient that you won't even need to charge fares. That's the kind of vision that I would like to see. I like fares usually. I'm not a no fare guy, but
I like fares.
but you know, if you don't have anybody, I think there's a utopia where you wouldn't have to charge fares.
Alright, I think, thank you all for coming. I know this was a very broad topic. I know there were a million more questions. We'll be bringing this conversation back in the fall. And I would like to start talking about the feasibility of the Colorado Boulevard BRT and maybe even bring back many of the people here. And then we would also like to talk about the sidewalk project. Frank, I'm sorry I did not invite you. I did intend to invite you, and then I thought a power couple in the panel might be a little harsh. But thank you for coming. I promise I definitely wanted you here. In the meantime, next week on Thursday, we would like to bring people back if you're willing and able. And we would like to do what is a salon where we would have the same discussion, but people would be able to talk face to face with each other. Also, anyone is welcome to stay and stick around if any of the panelists would like. There seems to be many eager faces who might want to talk to you. But if you don't have time tonight and you have time next Thursday, please come back. And we'd like to get people in more of a salon environment where they can have conversations with each other. And I think that covers everything. So thank you all.